A German shepherd dashes through a crowded coffee shop. Eyes closed, muscles flexed not to attack, but to protect a boy in a wheelchair from a delivery driver's flying boot. Everyone freezes. Coffee cups fall to the ground. For a split second, it looks like an act of violence. But what happens next reveals a bond forged in tragedy and one no one expected. Get ready for a story that will stop your heart and then heal it of second chances, quiet heroism, and the kind of miracles only God can orchestrate. The story behind this moment will make you believe in divine grace and the healing power of a faithful heart. Before we begin, tell me where in the world you're watching. The morning sun filtered softly through the leafy oaks of Maple Hill, a quiet town nestled between low Appalachian ridges and whispering fields. Spring had finally settled in after weeks of reluctant chill, and the sky was a gentle sweep of pale blue. The Bean and Birch Cafe, an outdoor favorite with honey-colored wooden tables and wildflower planters, buzzed with the kind of light-hearted energy only Saturday mornings can bring. Families sipped coffee and shared blueberry muffins. Retirees read newspapers, and a small boy in a wheelchair sat near the edge of the patio. His eyes on the German shepherd curled beside him like a bronze sentinel. Eli Holloway, 10 years old, was thin and small for his age, with a mop of brown hair that never stayed combed and bright eyes that were far too old for his freckled face. His legs tucked beneath a soft wool blanket hadn't moved since the accident 2 years ago, but his mind, quick and wide, never stopped. The wheelchair was custom matte black with red spokes and fitted with a tray where a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web sat open. Beside him, Baxter lay perfectly still, his coat a thick blend of sable and black ears, twitching only when a stranger passed too close. Baxter was 8 years old now, large and noble, with a faint scar above his left eye from his years as a working dog. He had once served alongside Eli's father, Officer Thomas Holloway, in the town's now disbanded K-9 unit. After Thomas's death in a gas explosion during a rescue call, Baxter was officially retired and became Eli's service dog, trained not only to fetch and guard, but to sense emotional shifts and provide stability during the child's episodes of panic. Today, Baxter rested in his down position, eyes tracking every motion, particularly anyone approaching Eli from behind. At a nearby table, Rachel Holloway, Eli's aunt and guardian, sipped her dark roast with an absent expression. She was in her late 30s, tall and lean, with chestnut hair twisted into a no-nonsense braid, and a wardrobe that leaned toward functional long cardigans, jeans, and boots. A librarian by trade, Rachel had stepped into the role of parent with reluctant grace after her brother's death. The grief had etched fine lines at the corners of her eyes and dulled the warmth in her voice, but she remained fiercely protective of Eli. Her planner lay open beside her coffee cup, already scribbled full. "Don't forget, Eli," she said, scanning her list. "We have Dr. Weston at 1:30 and your new braces to try on this evening." Eli didn't answer. He was staring at a monarch butterfly fluttering near the planter. "Aunt Rachel?" he asked quietly. "Do you think butterflies remember being caterpillars?" Rachel smiled faintly. "That's a good question for your science teacher, or maybe for poetry class." Just then, the low rumble of a diesel engine pulled up to the curb. A large white delivery van, unbranded, dusty, with dents across the passenger side, stopped awkwardly near the patio. The driver's door opened and out stepped a man in a navy work shirt and faded jeans. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and heavy, with the kind of muscle that once came from training but now carried exhaustion. His beard was trimmed short, flecked with gray, and a military tattoo peeked out from under his left sleeve. He moved like someone not used to quiet places. Blake Morrison had arrived in Maple Hill just a week earlier, taking over a regional delivery route for a shipping company. Few people knew his name yet. He rarely spoke more than necessary, kept his cap low, and wore the same steel-toed boots every day. The only place he ever lingered was the war memorial in the town square, where he stood silently, hands in pockets, reading the names with a storm behind his eyes. Today, his first delivery was for Bean and Birch. He hoisted a box marked glassware onto his shoulder and moved toward the patio. Navigating between tables, he misjudged a turn and bumped into a chair leg. The woman seated there yelped as her coffee splashed. Blake turned, muttered a gruff, "Sorry," then stepped around the table right into the space where Eli and Baxter were seated. His foot landed near the boy's tray, dangerously close to the book. Without looking, Blake gave a casual nudge of his boot toward the dog, more shooing than kicking, but careless and jarring. It was a mistake. Baxter reacted in a blink. He surged upward, placing his massive frame between Eli and the man his teeth bared, but silent, his body rigid with intent. The force of his movement knocked over the half-finished cup of chocolate milk. Eli gasped. A loud scrape echoed as nearby patrons stood startled. Blake froze instinctively, raising both hands. His box tilted dangerously on his shoulder. "Hey, whoa, calm down, boy," he said, voice rasping with something halfway between command and regret. Baxter didn't bark, he didn't lunge, but his low growl vibrated through the planks of the wooden patio like distant thunder. Rachel had already jumped to her feet. "Back away. Slowly." "I didn't know," Blake muttered, stepping back. His eyes flicked to the vest Baxter wore, navy with white lettering. "Service dog. Do not distract." He exhaled sharply. "I didn't mean anything." Rachel narrowed her eyes but said nothing. Eli's hand was on Baxter's head now, whispering quietly. "I'm sorry," Blake added again, this time to Eli, before turning and walking swiftly toward the van. As he hoisted the box into the cafe's side door, several customers whispered behind cupped hands. The entire encounter lasted less than a minute, but its aftershocks would ripple far deeper. Baxter returned to his down position, but his eyes never left the man. Rachel knelt beside Eli and checked his blanket, brushing away the spilled milk. "You okay, kiddo?" Eli nodded, but his voice was small. He looked familiar. Rachel paused, then looked back toward the van. Blake was already inside, hands gripping the wheel. For a moment, their eyes met. And for just a flicker beneath the shadowed cap through the dust-smeared window, Rachel saw something she couldn't name. Regret, recognition, or maybe guilt. As the van pulled away, Baxter's tail thumped softly against the deck. The afternoon sun slanted through the front windows of the Holloway house, casting warm light on the bookshelves lining the walls of the small living room. The place smelled faintly of lemonwood polish and chamomile tea. Rachel Holloway stood at the kitchen counter, drying a mug with slow, thoughtful movements. Her cardigan sleeves were rolled to her elbows, revealing pale arms marked by sun-flecked freckles and the faintest tremor in her fingers. She had been quiet since they returned from the cafe, her mind looping back to the moment Blake Morrison's boot nudged the service dog. Something about that man's reaction, half recognition, half pain, refused to leave her alone. Eli sat by the window in his wheelchair, still wrapped in the navy blanket. He was watching Baxter, who lay a few feet away on the rug, ears perked and body unusually tense. The German shepherd's eyes hadn't softened since they returned, still locked into high alert mode. Usually after outings, Baxter would relax beside Eli with his head on the boy's lap, but today was different. Today, something lingered in the air, an energy neither of them could name. Aunt Rachel Eli finally said, his voice tentative. She turned, eyebrows raised. "Can I tell you something? And you not get upset?" Rachel dried her hands and walked over, sitting on the armrest of the couch across from him. "I'm listening." Eli hesitated. "The man at the cafe, the one with the truck. I think Baxter knew him. I mean, really knew him." Rachel frowned. "What makes you say that? He got between us fast, like he always does when he senses a threat. but he didn't bark. And after that, he just kept watching the guy like he was trying to remember something. Rachel folded her arms. Dogs remember smells better than faces. Maybe he smelled something familiar. Cologne soap oil from the truck, who knows? Eli looked down at his lap. No, it was more than that. Baxter was shaking, not scared, like when he used to dream about Dad. Rachel stiffened. It had been months since Eli brought up Thomas unprompted. He used to whimper in his sleep. Eli continued. And once he growled in his dream. When I woke him, he acted like he didn't recognize me for a second. Rachel exhaled slowly. I remember. Baxter stirred at the sound of their voices, but remained in place. The scar above his eye caught the light. Rachel had never quite asked where the scar came from. Some things Thomas never told her, and some things she had been too afraid to ask. She studied Eli for a moment. He looked so much like his father. Same sharp jawline, same eyes that read too much into the world. Rachel rose and crossed to her desk in the adjacent room, returning with a thick manila folder. Inside were notes and photos from Thomas's canine service days. His training logs with Baxter photos from overseas, a few newspaper clippings. She laid them out on the table. Eli rolled closer eyes wide. That man at the cafe, Rachel said, pointing to a group photo of Thomas and several soldiers standing in a dusty training yard. Was it him? Eli leaned forward, scanning faces. He paused at one figure on the far left, a broad-shouldered man with his cap backward and a crooked grin. That's him, Eli whispered. He's younger there, but it's him. Rachel stared at the name scrawled beneath the photo. Blake Morrison. The name struck her with sudden clarity. She remembered Thomas mentioning him once, maybe twice, always briefly in the weary, guarded way soldiers speak of things they're still unpacking. A trusted partner. A man who once took a bullet for someone else. She closed the folder slowly. That man trained with your father, she said. If Baxter remembers him, it's because they shared something. Eli looked thoughtful. So why would he kick Baxter? Rachel didn't answer. Because maybe some memories are painful. Maybe Blake hadn't recognized Baxter until it was too late. Maybe he had and couldn't bear what it meant. Later that evening, as Rachel sat down to grade a stack of papers for the library's adult literacy program, her phone buzzed. It was a message from the youth outreach coordinator. Would you be interested in helping lead our new Reading with Therapy Dogs pilot? We're working with kids who have anxiety or PTSD. We could really use someone like you, plus a well-trained companion. Rachel glanced at Baxter, now sleeping next to Eli's bed, finally relaxed one paw over his muzzle. She replied with a simple, "Let's talk." The morning haze hadn't yet lifted from the hills surrounding Maple Hill when Blake Morrison parked his delivery van in front of the town's modest police station. The engine ticked as it cooled, mirroring the tight rhythm of his breath. For a long time he sat without moving hands, resting on the wheel shoulders hunched as though the weight of the past still lived on his back. His eyes, once alert and sharp from years in uniform, now carried the dull sheen of a man who hadn't slept right in years. The Maple Hill Police Department was a 2-story brick building, simple in design with a single blue flag fluttering by the front steps. The outer walls were clean, but weathered much like the man who now stepped through the glass doors. Inside, the scent of coffee and old paper filled the air. Behind the front desk sat a lean woman in her late 50s, with short silver hair and rimless glasses. Her nameplate read Linda. She glanced up from her computer, her expression polite but guarded. "Can I help you?" she asked. Blake nodded slowly. "I need to speak to someone about an incident at Bean and Birch 2 days ago, involving a service dog and a boy." Linda's fingers paused over her keyboard. "Are you the man from the video?" Blake didn't flinch. "Yes, ma'am." Linda studied him a moment longer before picking up the phone. "One moment." Moments later, the double doors behind her opened, and a tall man in uniform stepped out. Chief Bill Rowe had a presence that filled a room. In his early 60s, with a broad chest and a calm but assessing gaze, he moved with the careful patience of someone who'd seen too many years on the force. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and a badge from his days in the K-9 division was framed behind his desk. "I'm Chief Rowe," he said, extending a hand. "You're Blake Morrison." Blake nodded, shaking the man's hand. His grip was steady but cold. "Come on back," the chief said, leading him into a small, windowed office. The door clicked shut behind them. "Tell me what brings you in." Blake sat on the edge of the chair, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I made a mistake. At the cafe. I didn't know the dog was on duty. I reacted wrong. But it's more than that." Chief Rowe raised a brow, but said nothing. "I knew the dog," Baxter Blake continued. "He used to serve with my unit, with Thomas Holloway." At that, Rowe's expression shifted. He leaned back, fingers steepled. "You served with Thomas." Blake nodded. "We were deployed together. Kandahar, 2011 to 2013. I was there when he found Baxter's scrawny, half-starved pup outside the forward operating base. He was just a stray, but your brother, he saw something in him, trained him from scratch. I helped." Rowe exhaled slowly. Thomas never spoke much about Afghanistan, not in detail. He said some things should stay buried. Blake looked down. He was right. The room fell into a quiet that stretched long and tense. I saw the boy, Blake said. Saw Baxter. And I panicked. I wasn't ready. I've spent years pretending I'd forgotten, but seeing them together was like being back there. All of it. Thomas's voice, the missions, the fire, the day we lost him, it came back. Chief Rowe tapped a pen against his knee. "You say you were with him when he died. I wasn't." Blake said, shaking his head. "I wasn't with him that day. I should have been. He requested me for that shift, but I was pulled for something else. They went in without me. The blast. It wasn't supposed to happen." The chief nodded, his face unreadable. "The official report said, faulty gas line. Explosion took the whole rear wing. Thomas died instantly." Blake's voice cracked. "But something's never sat right with me. Thomas sent me a message the night before. Said he thought someone had tampered with the entry route, that he wanted to talk to me about it the next morning." "And you never saw him again?" Rowe finished. "No," Blake whispered. The chief stood and crossed to a filing cabinet in the corner. He pulled open a drawer, rifled through old service files, and extracted a thin manila folder. "You're not the first person to say something like that. I've heard whispers over the years. Inconsistencies, but no proof." Blake leaned forward. "What do you mean, I mean?" Chief Rowe said, closing the drawer with a soft thunk. "I think it's time we take another look." Unofficially, quietly. Blake nodded. "I want to help. I owe him. And the boy." Chief Rowe studied him for a long moment, then reached out and handed him the folder. "You start by reading that, and maybe by paying the Holloways a visit, properly this time." Blake hesitated. "I don't think they'll want to see me." "Make them want to," the chief said. As Blake stood to leave, Rowe added one last thing. "I saw you in the old team photos. Thomas spoke highly of you." Blake stopped in the doorway. "I didn't deserve it." "Maybe not then," Rowe said, "but maybe now's your chance to try." The air in Maple Hill had begun to carry the crisp hint of early autumn, the leaves only just beginning to show the first strokes of amber and gold. The town's rehabilitation park sat quietly behind the community center, a modest but well-kept space with paved paths, wooden benches, and an open lawn sectioned off for canine therapy sessions. Every Thursday afternoon, the field came alive with veterans and their service dogs, some retired, some still in training, all playing their part in healing wounds that couldn't be seen. Eli Holloway hadn't intended to return so soon. He still wasn't sure how he felt about what happened at the cafe or what his aunt had told him about Blake Morrison. But Rachel had signed them up for the Read and Heal program, and Baxter, sensing the routine, had started nudging his leash every Thursday morning. Eli sat quietly in his wheelchair near the edge of the field, watching as pairs of handlers and dogs performed basic drills, sit, stay, heel, recall. Rachel stood nearby chatting with the program coordinator, but her eyes kept flicking back toward Eli. Baxter sat beside him calm but alert, his gaze sweeping the perimeter. Then the moment shifted. From the side gate entered a man Eli hadn't seen since the cafe. Blake Morrison wore a faded army green jacket, the kind with too many pockets and frayed cuffs. His beard was trimmed short now, and his eyes, though still tired, no longer held the tightness of shame. A laminated badge clipped to his shirt marked him as a volunteer trainer. Blake moved with the practiced ease of someone used to watching every angle, but today his gait had softened. He carried a training pouch and wore scuffed leather gloves. When his eyes met Eli's across the field, he paused, his expression open, waiting. Eli's fingers tightened on Baxter's harness. Blake gave a small nod before stepping toward a group of veterans at the far end. He didn't approach Eli, not right away. Minutes passed. "Who is that?" a small voice asked. Eli turned to see a boy around 7 standing nearby, a little awkward in his oversized hoodie and jeans. He had unruly blonde hair and the kind of thin, pale frame that suggested frequent doctor visits. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, and he shifted from foot to foot nervously. "That's Baxter," Eli replied, gesturing to the dog. "He's my service dog." The boy's eyes lit up. "He looks like a soldier dog." He was. The boy crouched down, slightly peeking but not getting too close. "My name's Liam. My mom says I can't have a dog because we live in an apartment. But I like watching them." "Want to sit?" Eli asked, scooting his chair a bit to the side. Liam did knees pulled to his chest. "Does he bite?" "Only if he has to," Eli said. "He's more of a protector." Liam reached out slowly. Baxter sniffed his hand and gave a quiet chuff of approval. As the two boys spoke, Blake finished demonstrating a controlled walking drill and turned toward them. He approached carefully, stopping several feet away, giving Baxter time to assess. The dog shifted slightly but didn't growl this time. "Afternoon," Blake said gently. "May I join you?" Eli nodded once. "If you stay over there." Blake smiled faintly. "Fair enough." He crouched, resting his elbows on his knees. "You know your dad used to teach Baxter using a double cue system. Voice and hand signal. One of the cleanest transitions I've ever seen." Eli tilted his head. "You trained with my dad." "For 3 years," Blake said. "He was the best handler I've ever met. Not just because of the commands, but because he listened to the dogs. Really listened." Eli was quiet for a moment. "What's the hand signal for stay?" Blake raised his palm fingers spread, then brought it down slowly like pushing into the air. Baxter remained still. "Exactly that," Eli said softly. "I only remember because I was little when Dad taught it to me once. You remember more than you think," Blake said. Rachel approached, then cautious but not interrupting. Eli glanced toward her. "It's okay. He's not being weird." Rachel smirked faintly but didn't leave. Blake looked between them. "I just wanted to say thank you for not reporting me after the cafe. I came to the station because I needed to face it. But you could have made it worse." Rachel crossed her arms. "We figured if Baxter didn't bite you, maybe you deserved a second chance." Blake smiled at that, a genuine one this time. Liam, still seated, asked quietly, "Can Baxter do a trick?" Blake looked to Eli. "May I show him one?" Eli hesitated, then nodded. Blake raised 2 fingers and pointed. "Baxter, stand." Baxter rose to his feet. "Turn." Baxter spun in a slow circle, then sat. Liam clapped softly. "Whoa. Wanna try?" Blake asked him. Liam looked to Eli for permission. Eli grinned. "Go for it." Blake guided Liam through a modified hand gesture, and with Baxter's endless patience the trick was repeated. Liam's smile stretched wide. The late afternoon sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. Eli turned to Blake once more. "My dad trusted you, didn't he?" Blake didn't speak for a beat. "Then more than I ever deserved. But I want to honor that now. However you'll let me." Eli reached down, stroking Baxter's head. "Then keep showing me what he taught you." Blake blinked, then nodded. It was the start of something small, but real. The rain had been steady all morning, a soft, persistent rhythm tapping against the roof of Rachel's old house. The kind of rain that made the air smell like earth and pine, and made the walls feel closer, as if the house itself were breathing. Upstairs, the attic was dim and dust-scented, lit only by a narrow window that caught the silver-gray sky. Rachel had opened the old cedar trunk near the far wall, Thomas's trunk, the one he'd left behind when he shipped out for his final deployment. Eli had asked to explore it, a rare request, and she hadn't the heart to say no. She sat on a low stool near the doorway, sipping lukewarm tea as he rummaged carefully through the contents, folded uniforms, worn patches, a faded map with red ink lines, a tin box with dog tags, and a thick, leather-bound notebook. Baxter lay at the foot of the ladder, ears flicking occasionally at the creaks from above, but otherwise calm. Eli was focused quiet. He was always quiet these days. The kind of quiet that could hold weight grief, maybe, or growing questions he hadn't yet figured out how to ask. He opened the notebook, slowly, reverently running his fingers over his father's handwriting, then tucked between the pages a sealed envelope. Rachel noticed the change in his posture. "What is it?" Eli looked up. "It's addressed to Blake. But it's never been sent." Rachel stood her knees stiff. She took the envelope, reading the name on the front. "Blake Morrison, dated 3 weeks before Thomas died." Her fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal. The paper inside was yellowed around the edges, folded once down the middle. "Blake, if you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong. Maybe I've gone and pushed my luck one too many times. I won't waste time on cliches. I just need to say what matters. I never stopped trusting you. We both know what we saw last month. If anything happens to me, I want you to take care of Eli. Rachel will do her best. She's strong, stubborn, but he'll need someone who understands what it means to be afraid and keep going anyway. You've carried your guilt long enough. Let this be the start of something better. He'll need you. And honestly, I think you'll need him too. Thomas." Rachel folded the letter slowly, pressing it to her chest for a long moment. Eli watched her, unsure what to say. "He trusted him," she said softly. "Your father trusted Blake with what mattered most." Eli nodded, but his eyes were far away. Later that night, after dinner, Rachel sat alone at the kitchen table with Thomas's journal open beside her. The entries were uneven, some long and philosophical. Others just a few words, but each one bore the weight of someone trying to make sense of chaos. She stopped on a page dated 8 months before his death. "Blake's not himself lately. He won't say what's eating him, but I see it. The tremors in his hands, the way he jumps at fireworks. He's trying so hard to hold it together, but the pressure's too much. I've tried talking to him." He pushes back. "But I can't give up on him. I owe him that. We all do." Rachel exhaled, rubbing her eyes. Could she really keep pushing Blake away, knowing all this? She thought of Eli at the park, laughing for the first time in weeks as Blake taught him a hand signal. She thought of the way Baxter hadn't bristled or growled but sat beside the man with quiet recognition. In the living room, Eli lay curled on the couch, Baxter at his feet. The boy's breathing had settled into sleep, but his hand rested on the dog's back, a gesture of trust so deeply ingrained it didn't disappear even in dreams. Rachel walked over and covered him with the knitted blanket from the armchair. She looked at him for a long while, then down at the scar on Baxter's brow. Maybe some scars weren't warnings, they were memories. Reminders of who had walked through the fire and made it back. She returned to the attic just before midnight and slipped the letter back into its envelope. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed. Not for herself, but for the man her brother had trusted, and for the boy learning how to trust again. The morning sky over Maple Hill was an optimistic blue, the kind that made everything seem softer, kinder. At Maple Hill Elementary, the cheerful squeals of children on the playground carried into the air, blending with the scent of pencil shavings and warm asphalt. The school, a red brick building framed by maple trees, just beginning to bronze with early fall, sat tucked between two quiet streets. For most, it was a place of routine and innocence. Eli had been unusually quiet that morning. Dressed in a soft blue hoodie and black jeans, he sat in his wheelchair beside Baxter, waiting outside the library room for the weekly Paws and Pages session. The therapy reading group had become part of his new rhythm, and though he wouldn't admit it out loud, he had begun to look forward to it. Baxter, ever alert, sat at his side, his gaze scanning the hallway even as his body remained relaxed. Inside Miss Jennifer, the school librarian was setting out picture books on a low table. A woman in her 40s with shoulder-length dark curls and glasses that always slipped down her nose, Jennifer was known for her warm voice and slightly chaotic organizational style. She gave Eli a smile as she emerged into the hallway. "We've got a few new readers today," she said. "One of them's excited to meet Baxter." Eli gave a slight nod. He likes an audience. At that moment, the side gate that led to the parking lot swung open with a metallic creak. Rachel was still inside, signing visitor paperwork, leaving Eli temporarily unattended. A few children milled nearby, their backpacks bouncing as they headed to class. Among them was Liam. Liam, dressed in a faded red jacket and green sneakers, had become a fixture around Eli lately. He often arrived early just to greet Baxter, and sometimes lingered after the reading session to ask about dog training. His soft-spoken nature made him easy to overlook, but today that nearly became dangerous. A man stood just outside the gate. He looked out of place, too still for someone casually waiting. He wore a dark brown jacket with a raised collar, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. His hands stayed buried in his pockets, and his gaze scanned the playground like someone mapping exits. When his eyes landed on Liam, something sharpened. "Hey, kid," the man called softly, his tone coaxing. Liam paused at the curb, turned halfway toward the voice. "You dropped something," the man added, bending as if picking something up. Eli noticed the shift in Baxter before he fully registered what was happening. The dog stiffened beside him, ears pricking forward, head low. "Liam," Eli shouted, pushing his chair forward. Liam froze. The man reached forward, his fingers brushing Liam's sleeve. That was all Baxter needed. In one fluid motion, the German shepherd sprang forward, placing himself between Liam and the man, growling deep from his chest. It wasn't a wild sound, it was controlled, low, authoritative. A sound that meant one thing: stop. The man recoiled. What the Baxter's stance remained rigid, his body between the boy and the threat. Several parents nearby turned at the sound. One woman screamed. Another pulled out her phone. The man cursed under his breath and bolted through the gate, disappearing into the side street. Rachel came running seconds later, her face pale. "What happened?" Eli's voice shook but stayed even. He tried to grab Liam. Baxter stopped him. Jennifer had already called the school security officer. Within minutes, the area was taped off and the police were on site. Officer Naomi Graves, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s, took statements while kneeling to meet the kid's eyes. She wore her badge with quiet authority and kept her voice calm even when the situation wasn't. After checking on Liam, who clung to Rachel's hand and didn't speak for 10 minutes, Naomi turned to Eli. "Did you get a good look at the man?" Eli nodded. Tall, maybe 6 feet, brown jacket, ball cap, looked like he didn't belong. Rachel added, "I saw him from the parking lot. He didn't come through the main office. He used the side gate." When the officers reviewed the security camera footage, it confirmed what Eli and Rachel had seen and something more. The same man had been spotted 2 weeks earlier, lingering outside the cafe where Eli and Blake had first encountered one another. Chief Bill Rowe arrived not long after, his expression grim. "This isn't random," he said after reviewing the reports. "Whoever this is, he's been watching for a while." Blake showed up an hour later, having heard from Rachel. His face was taut with tension. "Was anyone hurt?" "No," Rachel said. "Because of Baxter." Blake crouched beside the dog, running a hand down his back. "Good boy," he murmured. Officer Graves approached, nodding in greeting. "Sir." "Morrison. I heard you had military intelligence experience." Blake straightened. 12 years, recon and canine operations. We could use your input. Whoever this man is, he's been planning, and he might not be done." Chief Rowe glanced at Blake. "You up for helping with the profile?" Blake's answer was immediate. "Yes. Just tell me where to start." That evening, the town's online community board was flooded with praise for Baxter. Parents shared photos, someone posted video from the playground, and Eli's quiet bravery, along with the calm control of his dog, became a symbol of courage. For the first time since arriving, Blake's name came up not with suspicion, but with gratitude. The courthouse in Maple County stood with the weight of 100 quiet stories etched into its stone. A modest structure with arched windows and white pillars that had faded to a weathered gray. It was nestled between the town hall and an old church that rang out soft bells on the hour. That morning, as mist rolled in from the nearby hills and curled against the courthouse steps, it felt like the whole town had paused. Inside, the atmosphere was hushed but taut. Every creak of the wooden benches echoed a little too loudly. Blake Morrison sat at the defense table, hands folded tightly, jaw set. He wore a navy button-down shirt and khaki slacks, clean lines, no frays, no leather jacket. His face was freshly shaven, his dark hair combed, but the fatigue around his eyes couldn't be scrubbed away. He looked less like a man on trial and more like someone facing ghosts he could no longer outrun. The courtroom was filled with familiar faces, parents, teachers, even some of the veterans from the therapy park. They'd come not out of curiosity, but because what happened weeks ago at the cafe had shaken something deep in the town. For some, Blake's act that day still lingered as a threat. For others, the memory of him protecting their children, helping investigators, standing in the background with calm urgency, those things had begun to rewrite their opinion. Eli sat beside Rachel on the front bench, his small hand resting on Baxter's shoulder. The German shepherd, fitted with his formal service harness, lay calmly at Eli's side, tail thumping softly when he recognized friendly faces. Rachel, dressed in a forest green cardigan and long gray skirt, looked composed but pensive. Her hands gripped her bag in her lap, knuckles pale. Judge Miriam Holloway presided, an older woman in her 60s with short silver hair and piercing brown eyes that seemed to look straight into the soul. Known for her even temper and zero tolerance for emotional manipulation, she sat poised behind the bench like a mountain unmoved by wind. The district attorney, a young man named Alan Price, laid out the case: disorderly conduct, verbal harassment, and aggressive behavior at a public cafe. The video showed Blake approaching Eli, ignoring the child's warnings, making sudden movements, and provoking a clearly marked service dog. But as the defense attorney rose, the story began to unfold differently. Blake's lawyer, a calm-spoken man named Harvey Bennett, presented his argument with a surgeon's precision. "What you see on this tape," he said, "is not the calculated aggression of a dangerous man, but the unraveling of someone who never left the battlefield." Blake Morrison served 3 tours overseas. He trained dogs to detect explosives and save lives. What happened that morning was not hostility. It was a triggered flashback, a moment of uncontrolled trauma. He paused, letting the silence do its work. "And what's more important, since that day, Mr. Morrison has done everything within his power to make amends. He turned himself in. He offered his military records. And most importantly, he gained the trust of the very boy he once frightened." Harvey turned to Eli. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, the young man who was present that morning would like to speak." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Rachel stiffened, placing a hand on Eli's knee. "You don't have to do this." "I want to," Eli said simply, voice steady. Judge Holloway looked down at him. "Mr. Holloway, are you comfortable sharing with the court?" Eli nodded. "Yes, ma'am." A microphone was brought to him, and the room fell silent. Eli looked around, then down at Baxter, then up again. "When he came up to me that day, I was scared. Not because I thought he was evil, because he looked like he didn't know where he was." He took a breath. "My dad was a soldier. He used to talk in his sleep sometimes. He had to sit with his back to the wall in restaurants. He trained Baxter, taught me how to use the dog to feel safe. I didn't understand it back then." He swallowed. "But I think Mr. Blake was having one of those moments. Like when your brain brings the past into the now and it doesn't ask if you're ready. And since then, he's helped me. He showed me how to train Baxter better. He helped the police find a guy who tried to grab my friend." Eli looked at the judge. "I forgive him, and I believe my dad would have too." There wasn't a sound in the courtroom. Rachel sat with her lips pressed tight. Slowly, deliberately, she stood. "Your Honor," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I was against this at first. I wanted Blake Morrison nowhere near my nephew. But I've read the letter my brother wrote to him. I've seen the journal entries. And I've watched Eli grow stronger, not more afraid. My brother trusted this man. And now so do I." That was the turning point. After a brief recess, Judge Holloway returned with her decision. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "your actions that morning were reckless but not malicious. The court recognizes the mitigating circumstances of untreated PTSD and your subsequent cooperation and service to the community." She leaned forward slightly. "Rather than incarceration, I am assigning you to a mandatory trauma rehabilitation program through the Maple County Veterans Outreach. You will also perform 100 hours of community service, specifically in canine-assisted therapy programs." Blake exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. He nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." The gavel came down. It was over. Outside the courthouse, the crowd dispersed slowly. Some nodded to Blake as they passed. Others said nothing but didn't avert their eyes. Rachel stepped forward. "This doesn't erase what happened." Blake nodded. "I know, but it's a start," she said. Eli smiled faintly, Baxter leaning into his leg like a shield that was now also a bridge. The autumn sun filtered softly through golden maple leaves, painting the sidewalks of Maple Hill in hues of amber and fire. It was one of those crisp mornings when the air smelled like distant wood smoke and freshly raked earth. Outside the Maple Hill Community Center, rows of folding chairs were arranged beneath strings of white pennant flags that fluttered gently in the breeze. People gathered in clusters, veterans with their medals pinned over pressed jackets, families holding thermoses of cider, children with dogs on leashes who sniffed the air like something special was about to happen. Inside, the atmosphere was warmer still. The large hall, usually used for bingo nights and book clubs, had been transformed. A makeshift stage stood at the front, draped in navy and cream fabric. A banner read, "Service Beyond Duty," honoring Maple Hill's heroes. In front of the podium sat a wide table bearing a single polished plaque engraved with the name Baxter. Next to it, a leather harness and a folded American flag. Eli sat in the front row between Rachel and Blake Baxter, resting quietly at his feet. The German Shepherd, wearing a freshly brushed coat and polished therapy dog vest, looked every bit the symbol he had become. He was 6 years old now, large and strong, with golden brown eyes that held the kind of understanding one usually only found in people who had seen both darkness and light. Eli wore a gray blazer too big for him and a red tie that Rachel had knotted 3 times before, getting it just right. The boy had grown more confident since the incident at school, and the trial he spoke more freely, smiled more often. He still used his wheelchair, but he no longer hunched or tried to shrink within it. Today he sat tall. Blake, seated to Eli's left, was almost unrecognizable from the man who once sparked fear in a small-town cafe. He wore a fitted navy suit, his dark hair now streaked with silver at the temples, and his posture was steady. A laminated visitor tag was clipped to his breast pocket, but today that would change. The mayor of Maple Hill. Susan Delaney, a short, energetic woman in her 50s with a voice like firm velvet, stepped up to the podium. Dressed in a cranberry-colored coat and knee-high boots, she addressed the room with practiced ease. Today, we honor not just a dog, but what this town stands for. Resilience, redemption, and the power of second chances, she began. Baxter isn't just a service dog. He's a protector, a teacher, a bridge between trauma and healing. And the people here, Eli, Rachel, Blake, have shown us that healing doesn't come all at once, but in steps, in trust, in moments when we choose to show up for each other. She gestured to the plaque. It is our great honor to present Baxter with the Service Beyond Duty Award. His bravery saved a child. His loyalty brought our community together, and his story, well, it changed us all. Eli wheeled forward to accept the plaque, and the crowd erupted in applause. Baxter rose, tail swishing, nudging Eli's hand. The boy spoke into the microphone with a voice steadier than anyone expected. My dad trained Baxter before he died. He said that Baxter was born to protect. I think he also meant to protect people's hearts, because that's what he did for me. And Blake, too. He didn't just help me walk again, he helped me believe again. A hush fell over the room. Then Eli added, and my dad would have wanted me to share Baxter. So, we're starting something new. He stepped aside, and Rachel wheeled out a portable stand with a hand-drawn sign, Paws and Pages. Reading with Baxter now open to all kids every Wednesday afternoon. From the third row, Liam stood up shyly, his freckled face lit with anticipation. Can I sign up? Laughter broke through the quiet, and Mayor Delaney smiled. Of course, Liam. You'll be the first. As the applause subsided, Blake rose to the stage. Mayor Delaney turned to him and extended a formal certificate. Mr. Blake Morrison, she said, for your service overseas, your recovery here at home, and your commitment to turning pain into purpose, we welcome you as the official canine trainer for Maple Hill's Veterans and Therapy Program. Blake accepted the certificate with a small bow of the head. His eyes briefly met Rachel's. She gave him a nod, the kind that said, we're okay now, and he returned it with gratitude. I spent a long time running from the past, Blake said. But sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means building something new with what's left. And, thanks to a boy, a dog, and a second chance, I finally stopped running. In the closing moments of the ceremony, a surprise guest was brought forward, Mrs. Granger, a 78-year-old widow whose late husband had served with Blake and Eli's father. Frail but sharp-eyed, she wore a navy beret and a brooch shaped like a poppy. She offered Blake a worn training whistle on a leather cord. This belonged to your commanding officer, she said. He would have been proud of you. Of both of you. Blake's hand trembled as he accepted it. Afterward, Outside, beneath the golden canopy of leaves, kids gathered around Baxter. Rachel watched them, arms folded across her chest, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us," she said to Blake. Blake chuckled. "I'd say it's the best kind of work." Eli joined them. "Think Baxter can handle a class of 10 readers and 2 wannabe trainers?" Blake knelt to scratch behind Baxter's ear. "He's handled worse." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, the family they never expected, but somehow became Eli, Rachel, Blake, Baxter, and even little Liam stood together, stitched by grief, healing, and the miracle of presence. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or angels. They come quietly, wrapped in the loyalty of a dog, the courage of a wounded man, or the steady love of a child. In Maple Hill, what began as fear turned into forgiveness, and broken lives were gently pieced back together by grace, one choice at a time. Just like Baxter stood between danger and Eli, perhaps God also places protectors in our path. People, animals, or moments meant to guide us home. If you believe that healing is possible, that second chances are real, and that faith can move even the most stubborn mountains, then this story was for you. May you find the courage to forgive, the strength to rebuild, and the faith to believe that even your darkest chapter can lead to light. Please share this story with someone who needs hope today. Comment Amen if you believe in second chances and God's quiet miracles. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories that touch the heart. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, healing, and love.